Space alert! Space alert! All personnel report to their designated gaming groups. Space alert! Hello and welcome to The Lucky Roll, an eclectic channel for eclectic games. And today we're reviewing Space Alert by Vlada Shvatl and CGE Games. Space Alert is a cooperative survival game played in 10-minute increments in which players plan a series of moves in succession via the use of cards in order to combat or defend against the various threats against their spaceship. Players are warned about these threats by a central computer that is essentially a soundtrack of various missions that are both available online and on a CD that comes with the game. Over a series of 12 moves, players cooperatively play cards, dictating their movement and actions in unison, and in order to defend and use the ship effectively, must coordinate with each other to ensure that whilst one player feeds power to the weapons, another player is in position in order to fire them, and a third is in position to ensure effective transfer of power to the correct section. There are also further responsibilities, such as ensuring that shields are charged, that the computer is maintained, boarding actions are repelled, fighters are launched, and computer viruses are combated. If players make a mistake or an event happens that upsets the pattern of 12 moves agreed upon by the players, then the coordination breaks down, and players will struggle quite harshly to survive. This is a basic element of the game. Other aspects, such as boarding actions and computer viruses, further complicate players' efforts to remain alive and win the game. There are 3 avenues of attack that face the ship on the game, and players need to coordinate their positions on the board to both defend and shoot down incoming threats that try and destroy the ship before it escapes via hyperspace after 12 rounds. If a threat approaches on the starboard or blue side, then players need to ensure that there is someone in position in order to fire upon the intruder, or indeed in order to charge the shields in case the ship is fired upon. If a player or players make an error and misplay a card that moves them to the port rather than the starboard side where the threat is starboard, then the defense is wasted, or the shot fired by the player on the port side is missed. This is further complicated again by players needing to divert power to both shields and weapons from a central hub or engineering level in the base level of the ship, and divert it again to port or starboard sections respectively so it can be fed to the upper part of the ship. So movement in the game is not just left and right, it is also up and down. It's not always as easy as a player simply parking in a room and spamming the divert power or fire function either, as moves are dictated by cards which are drafted at the start of every round. So a self-designated weapons officer for the first challenge may find that they lack the cards to fire the weapons for a subsequent challenge, and may end up diverting power or repelling boarders instead in order to utilize the hand that they have been dealt for that particular round. The game encourages a distinct communications officer and captain roles amongst the players, and coordination is essential in order to play effectively, as this game can be surprisingly difficult. In our several playthroughs, we found a significant difference with plays where we did our own thing and other games where we coordinated on. You learn quickly that poor communication leads to players squandering precious power in wasted shots, or indeed no ammunition being available, and firing 2 shots or 2 players performing the same function twice and squandering a turn happened more often than you thought, even with games where we distinctly coordinated. The aesthetic of the game is very retro, and whilst I found it charming, it didn't exactly grab me either. It has a 1950s, 1960s, black and white Dan Dare, Captain Proton, retro style vibe, which is not my favorite sci-fi aesthetic. The soundtrack also reflects this, and I guess if you're a classic Doctor Who or Flash Gordon or similar sci-fi aesthetic fan, then this game would be totally up your alley. Where this game did click for me, however, is when my friend Tony used a custom Trek Alert mission from Board Game Geek to play the game, and suddenly I was transformed. I went from enjoying the game to being totally immersed in it. The addition of a custom fan-made 1960s Star Trek aesthetic with resultant sound effects was the secret sauce, as it were, to make this game from a fun one to a brilliant one. It is, of course, a degree of shallowness on my part, and no doubt fanboyism, but it is the only genuine critique that I can level at what is otherwise an excellent and original little game. It's a game that is simple to play, but devious in its simplicity, and is only let down to a degree, and for no other reason than my personal bias, I must stress, in its 1950s and 1960s sci-fi aesthetic. Once the game was played with a 1960s Trek Alert soundtrack, it was absolute gold. Were Vlada Chvátil or CGE Games to re-release this game with a popular franchise skin such as Star Trek, Firefly, Star Wars, or indeed a different, more grittier sci-fi aesthetic, or one with an overarching narrative, I believe that they would be on a surefire winner. There is a very clever and enjoyable game here that is complex enough to be interesting, but mechanically simple enough to attract casual players who would delve into the hobby because of the strength of a popular and well-known franchise if there was one attached to it. An excellent game that is well worth checking out, and one I hope to see again in the future in another iteration from these developers in perhaps a more well-known guise, or indeed a more modernized sci-fi aesthetic. As always, this is Sean from The Lucky Roll. If you enjoyed these videos, please like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And until next time, good luck, God bless, and stay safe.